Hi, welcome to my May mid reading wrap up. This month was full of so many mid-average ratings, and I feel like my reckoning was coming, right? Like the first 4 months of my year, I had so many 5 and 4 stars that it's really unlike me because I feel like I'm kind of a hard rater. But May came along and I read the most books in a month that I have this whole year, probably in the last couple years, and I had so many 3-star ratings. 3-star ratings are not bad, but they're not any kind of rating or book to write home about. It's, for me, a 1-star rating would be like a DNF. And then we get to a 2 stars, and 2 stars is like, I do not like it, I did not enjoy it, there's too many things wrong with it. 3 stars, you know, there are some good things, there's some bad things. It was entertaining enough. I would maybe recommend it to certain people, but it's not a book that I'm going to remember or go back to. 4 stars is really good, really enjoyed it, but there's something in there that just didn't hit me like in the feels, or just didn't hit me as a 5-star feeling. And then 5 stars, obviously, 5-star feeling. Those are books that I'm going to remember, books that I really, really loved. So unfortunately, no 5 stars this month. I had, I think, maybe 1 or 2 4 stars, and then the majority were 3 stars. And then I did have a 2-star sprinkled in there. And with my ratings, I do full star ratings. I don't do half stars or quarter stars. I know that that would probably be good for certain ratings because there are certain instances where a 3 or 4, a 3.5 would really nail that rating. But for me, I'm a Goodreads girly. They don't do half ratings on Goodreads. So I just keep my ratings to full stars. I don't go into the halves. And then sometimes I think if I get too nitty gritty, then I'll like think too much about it. So I just do full stars. I don't do halves. Let's get into it. I am going to start with the books that I read in the beginning to the end. The first book that I read this month was 6 of Crows. I started this book at the end of April, but I finished it in May. I really liked this book, pleasantly surprised. I was a little worried since it is a YA novel, and sometimes YA just doesn't really hit me, and sometimes it's really corny and a little too cheesy for me, but this one was great. I think I really do enjoy Leigh Bardugo's writing. I read another Leigh Bardugo this month that I'll talk about later, but this book was really great. I get the hype. The characters are really fleshed out. There's a lot of found family in here. There is a huge world to kind of learn about. I think if you had read the trilogy, the Shadow and Bones trilogy, it would have given you a lot more background, because I definitely felt a little lost in the beginning with all the different names. But I think if you don't want to read the trilogy and you just jump into this like I did, I think you'd be fine. I kind of figured it out as I went. And yeah, it's just a big heist book. I mean, so many people have read this book. I actually picked up the second book because it is a duology, and I gave it 4 stars, and I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was the highly anticipated Emily Henry release that came out. I have read Book Lovers and Happy Place, and now this is my 3rd Emily Henry book. I don't know if I'm going to read more Emily Henry. You know, sometimes you'll read an author a couple times and you kind of get a gist if they're going to be a must-read, and I don't think Emily Henry is going to be a must-read for me. Book Lovers, I know, is really beloved, and it's probably one of her fan favorites. For me, Book Lovers was just too cringy. I get really icked out and cringed out by most romances, so I'm probably not the audience for them. But I didn't love Book Lovers. I think I gave it 3 stars. And then I read Happy Place last summer, and I really enjoyed Happy Place. I felt like Happy Place had a lot of other plot and a lot of other characters that really made that story for me, and the romance almost felt like an add-on to that, or like a main thread that ran throughout. And I felt like the characters in Happy Place I could relate to. I really liked Happy Place. I actually gave Happy Place 5 stars last summer. So going into this book, I was like, okay, it's gonna be hit or miss for me. But there was a couple things that I had issues with. And one of the things was the character development, the character arcs were very unsatisfying to me in this one. They were both dealing with different things, and they had to do a certain amount of growth for me to have felt like, okay, they've learned, and for that ending to work. Didn't love it. Also, it wasn't that funny, and I know it's just a title and it's like, it's playing off of the saying, oh, it's a funny story, blah, blah, blah. I get that, but I was kind of hoping there was going to be more of a comedic undertone and more funny bits, and it just didn't hit for me. I'm not sure if I'm going to read Emily Henry moving forward. I think with this author, I will definitely read the synopsis and do a case-by-case basis, and then see if people who liked Happy Place like that book before I read it. I do appreciate everybody that does really like this author. I can understand why you like her writing and her books, and I get it, but it's probably just not for me. So anyways, I gave this one 3 stars. The next book I read this month was a nonfiction book called There's Always This Year on Basketball and Ascension. And this is by Hanif Abderkib. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. He is kind of a cultural critic. He does thought pieces. He has a couple other books out, one of them being A Little Devil in America, that I actually have on my bookshelf that I'm going to be reading soon. But this one kind of grabbed me because I enjoyed basketball and as a kid and growing up, and I had a little bit of an idea of basketball culture, and so I wanted to kind of see how he related that to his life, and this is a great intersection of his life growing up and the culture at the time, and how that related to basketball players coming up in the kind of the local areas that he was living in. And it's not a ton of basketball. Like, he definitely touches on a few famous players that came up when he was coming up and growing up. This is definitely a book that you have to be in the mood for. It's a thought piece. It is prosy. There is different poetic syntax that he uses. So you definitely have to be in the mood for it. I think some of it went over my head. Some of it just, it's literature, you know what I mean? And it just like went over my head, but I still enjoyed it. I still found a lot of things very insightful in here that I could connect with, and really enjoyed this. So it's definitely making me look forward to reading A Little Devil in America, which I have on my TBR. And another really cool thing about this is he broke up the book in period or quarters. So like basketball is played in quarters: first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. And he structured the novel in a first quarter, a second quarter, a third quarter, and a fourth quarter. And within those quarters, it was like a countdown of the 12-minute clock in the quarter. So it was really interesting. I really liked how he structured it. It was really fun part of the book. So anyways, this one I gave 4 stars. And the next book I read was Sisters of the Lost Nation by Nick Medina. This was a book that I was really excited to get to this year. He has another release later this year that I am planning on reading. I unfortunately was a little let down by this. This is a book about a girl who lives on the reservation, and this casino is kind of the focal hub of the reservation, and a lot of Native American girls that are living on the reservation start to go missing. And there are people that are non-Native American that are coming in and out to go to the casino, and there is just a lot of different things going on with law enforcement having jurisdiction or not having jurisdiction, and how crime is taken care of, I guess, so to speak. And there is some mythological horror in here. It just felt like it wasn't as thrillery as I wanted. It didn't have as much mythological horror as I wanted. It didn't do enough of the things that I was looking forward to, I guess. And that's probably just a me thing. I also didn't love how it was structured. The author structured it in time jumps, and so you were jumping back and forth in time, and it did get a little bit confusing for me. I think you could follow it fairly well, but I don't really know the reasoning behind the time jumps because I don't think it added to the story. So I'm kind of curious to why he structured it. It's probably for some reason that went over my head. But anyways, the Sisters of the Lost Nation, it was fine. Everything felt like it kind of happened all of a sudden at the end. The pacing was a little bit off for me, but I ended up giving this 3 stars. I will read more Nick Medina though. I think that he is a good writer, and I'm still looking forward to his other release that's coming out very soon. So anyways, this one's a 3-star for me. And then the next book that I read that is part of my Throne of Glass journey is Queen of Shadows. and this was my Throne of Glass book that I read this month. It's a very beefy book. They only get beefier and beefier, which kind of make me nervous because I feel like the longer the books get, the more critical I get of them, because I am someone who thinks that the longer they are, the more editing there could have been. And a lot of times a book, to me, does not warrant being over 500 pages, especially in a series where you're breaking it up across different books. So I was already kind of going into it a little bit nervous, but this came off of me reading Assassin's Blade and Heir of Fire, and I actually really enjoyed Heir of Fire. I didn't so much love Assassin's Blade, but Heir of Fire, I could feel it picking up, and I really enjoyed Heir of Fire. So going into this one, I was really looking forward to it. Without giving too much away, since, you know, it's kind of hard to talk about a book in the middle of a series without doing spoilers, but overall, I just felt like there wasn't enough emotional weight given to moments where I thought there should have been more emotional weight. And then there was a lot of emotional drama and weight given to moments where I didn't think warranted it. So it was kind of interesting. There were some moments where I thought was very anticlimactic, where I felt like we were really building up to some of these moments and it just happened, and it just seemed like, okay, that's it. I mean, we built up this moment and this instance to be such a big thing, and it was so easy. Selena, or in this book she's Aelin, she didn't have the emotional connection to a certain character in this book that I really thought she would. The emotional weight for different things was kind of thrown off for me. This one actually ended up being 3 stars for me, unfortunately. I also think it's getting a little grating for me that everybody falls in love with Aelin and everybody loves her who comes into her circle, and everybody is so hot, everybody is so beautiful, but you know, she's the best, she's the prettiest, you know, and it gets grating. And I can see her growth, but yeah, that part of it gets a little bit on me at some points. But anyways, I gave Queen of Shadows 3 stars. And then this next book was a big bummer book for me for this month, and it was Magnolia Parks. I know this is a polarizing book, and going into it, I knew that I was going to have the right mindset of being able to let things kind of roll off my shoulder, and there was going to be drama for drama's sake in this book. But even knowing that going in, I still just could not get with it. The writing is very thought catalog. It's very kind of amateurish to me, and I hate to say that because I know people love the writing of these books and absolutely love these characters. I think just for me, there were so many metaphors that just made it feel so cheesy, and all of the outfit descriptions and everything, it just wasn't my cup of tea. And I can definitely see why people would like this, and for me, it did the opposite. Also, there was so many things in here where, you know, characters, teenagers or young 20-year-olds talking about having sex in front of their parents and their parents not caring. There were so many different instances where I was like, that's not realistic. That's not how, you know, people talk, and that bothered me. And I can only go up and down in a relationship so many times in a span of a book. You know, I can watch Grey's Anatomy, I can watch Scandal, I can watch all of these, you know, Gossip Girl, One Tree Hill, whatever, you know, I can watch those drama shows over a long span of time and do the will they, won't they dance with the main characters. But for some reason, in a shorter form content like a book, it just, when it's every other page that they're breaking up and getting back together, breaking up and getting back together, and it feels like it's the same reasons over and over, I can't do it. Yeah, I don't think I will be continuing Magnolia Parks, even though everybody says Daisy Hates the next book is way better. I don't think I can do it. I just don't think it's for me. So I ended up giving Magnolia Parks 2 stars. And then another new release that I read this month was The Familiar, and this was my second Leigh Bardugo. This one was fine. I like historical fiction, so I thought I was going to really get into this and really enjoy it. But for me, there was just nothing too exciting about it. I felt like throughout I was kind of dawdling along, and nothing really was hitting me in any particular way. I don't have much to say about it, and I think that was probably the problem that I had with it. I don't think that her characters were anything to write home about, and I think that's something that people really love about her books. So if that's something you really like and you're not a big historical fiction person, I'd probably just say pass on this one. Anyways, I ended up giving The Familiar 3 stars. And then the next book I read this month was Claire Keegan's Small Things Like These. So I know people really love this little novella, and I think I went in with too high of expectations. This is a book that would be great if you read it during like the winter Christmas season, cuddled up, and you just want a sweet short read, then this is perfect. If you're going into this thinking it's going to have some really deep thoughts and for it to be super impactful, for me, that's just not the case. I really thought Keegan's writing is great. The way that she characterizes characters and different things is great, but the ending, I felt like I would have really loved the last 1 to 2 pages to be extended further and to really have savored the theme, and it just felt like it kind of wrapped up real quick at the end. I just didn't think it went deep enough. I think that the idea and the sentiment is really sweet, but I've seen that idea and sentiment in a lot of other movies and books and content, and this just didn't do anything different for me. I think there's a time and place for this book. I think if you are on the fence of reading it, read it, because I am definitely in the minority with my thoughts on it, and it is such a short book. It is not a commitment. You can read it in an hour or so, and I definitely think it's worth reading to get your own opinion on it since it is so short. And there is a sweet meaning and sweet ending, so definitely give it a try. I ended up giving this 3 stars just because it didn't go as deep as I would have liked it. The next book I read was another new release, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. This was my first Abby Jimenez book. I initially wasn't really that intrigued by this book, but I saw a lot of people talking about it. I saw a lot of people saying it was more than just a romance book, so that kind of intrigued me because I very much like books that have romance, but there's other stuff going on, like I said before. So I picked this one up. This one did for me what Funny Story didn't. So I really enjoyed the character arcs of these characters. They both have mommy issues, but I feel like the ending, we really saw growth and we really saw change. I think this is a really easy, quick read. Even though it is, I think, nearly 400 pages, it reads really quickly. I thought there was some cute things in here. Was it something super memorable? Probably not for me, but I did enjoy it. I think it's a great beach book or reading by the pool type book. I ended up giving it 3 stars just because it didn't leave any lasting impressions, but I did think it was entertaining enough. Then going from Just for the Summer to Monstrilio. So as you can see, my month was all over the place. I was trying everything. I really gave myself a lot of opportunity to find some new favorites. But you know, it just wasn't hitting. So anyways, Monstrilio was the next book I read. I was actually really anticipating this one because I know it was on a lot of people's favorites for 2023. Again, it just kind of fell flat for me, and I'm starting to think the problem is me. It was fine. I think I wanted more emotional gravitas, more emotional depth with these characters. I felt like the characters didn't show enough of their grief and their pain, and I understand the point of the book was them to show how they're grappling with their grief in a different way, but it just didn't really translate for me, I guess, and that's okay. Some books do for people and some don't. It's definitely a very interesting concept, something I haven't read in ever maybe, or in a very long time, so this one was fine. I ended up giving it 3 stars. I would possibly read more from this author depending on what the book was about. So I think if you're intrigued and interested in this book, give it a try and see how you feel. You can get a good grasp of it within the first third of the book because it stays fairly the same throughout. That was Monstrilio. Definitely one off my TBR that I was really wanting to get to this year, so I'm glad I read it. And then I finished off this month with a graphic novel. I was trying to do at least 1 graphic novel a month for this year. I kind of fell off last month, I think, but I ended up reading Kindred, the graphic novel. I've actually had this for a couple years now. I remember I read Kindred, I think in like 2020, and really enjoyed it. I think I borrowed it from the library, so I wanted to buy my own copy. Ended up accidentally purchasing this graphic novel adaptation instead of the actual book, and then it just kind of sat on my shelves as one of those books that I was like, I'll get to one day. So I rediscovered it on my shelf and I was like, oh, it's perfect. It'll fit for my graphic novel goal. And the artwork is really great. I think it's, as far as I'm concerned, I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was kind of broken up in cool sections. The issue I had was was a little confusing at times. It was hard to follow the story at some points, and if I hadn't read the novel, the source material before, I would have been a lot more lost. So I think if you were jumping into this without reading the source material, you may have been really lost, and there might have been a lot of questions left unanswered. But because I had read the book before, I was okay. Because of that, and there was a lot of kind of weird segues and weird transitions, I ended up just giving this a 3-star. It was fine. I think I would definitely read more graphic novels by this duo. They've done Parable of the Sower, and it's cool at the end they kind of talk about, you know, questions, how they decided on that artwork, comments that Octavia Butler's estate had when they were creating this book. So I really liked that background on it, but I would not read this unless you had read the original book. So this one ended up getting 3 stars. So this is my stack of May reads. I'm gonna try to pick it up without dropping it. I think it's a pretty good stack. I'm pretty impressed. I think this is the most I've read in a month in a long time. My arms are hurting. A mix of new releases, all kinds of different books. I went all over the place. I went from romance, historical fiction, YA fantasy, regular fantasy, you know, everything. So I definitely gave it a good college try this month, but fortunately just didn't pan out as well as I wanted. But because this month was a little meh, next month we'll pick it up again and we'll be back on course with a lot of 4 and 5 stars, I'm hoping. Really appreciate you being here and watching, and I hope you have a great reading month ahead.